So with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Pete Klaphake and Dr. Jill Nezworski to the front of our room here. So Pete and Jill, come on up. And I'm going to start out with several questions that I think people will be interested in hearing the answers to. And then we're going to open this up to your questions. So if you have questions as I'm talking, please write them down and save them, because there'll be plenty of time to ask questions. Okay, so Jill and Pete, you have microphones here. You don't have to pick them up or anything. They should be able to hear you. If they stop flashing green, let us know. First of all, why don't you, Jill, give us a little intro to yourself and your background as a veterinarian. What do you bring to the table to talk to us about the VFD?
Yeah, so I am currently a private poultry practitioner. I started my own practice in 2010. Prior to that, I spent 4 years working for one of the U.S.'s largest hog integrators, Christensen Farms, as sow veterinarian for approximately 190,000 sow system. And before that, I spent 4 years at a company called Michael Foods, which is one of the largest egg processors in the United States. And in context to this prescription topic, the whole idea of prescription medications is not new. The swine, dairy, and beef industry have been following these rules for a long time. Many of the products commonly used in hog production are used off-label and therefore fall under prescription guidelines. So although we as a poultry industry may be reeling a bit to figure out how to comply with these rules, our other agriculture commodities have been doing this for years and years. So this isn't really a new, and it doesn't have to be an entirely new process if we learn from what they've been doing all along. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Pete?
I am a third-generation turkey farmer. Our operation is centralized in Melrose. We raise all hens. This whole VFD stuff is new to me. We're currently working on our plan. Unfortunately or fortunately, it depends upon how you look at it. We work hand in hand with Jill here. So as far as getting other ideas on different things that are out there, we're probably not going to be able to provide a whole lot as far as that goes. But we are quite far in our planning, hoping that our planning is suitable for what the rules states. But I guess just like everybody else, we'll learn as we go. So.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to start with question number 1 here. So what constitutes a valid veterinary client-patient relationship, or the Vcpr, which is central to the application of these rules? Jill, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so a Vcpr is a term you'll hear thrown around a lot because that's really the key component that this whole prescription process revolves around. In order for a veterinarian to prescribe medication, there has to be a veterinary client-patient relationship. And that means that the veterinarian is licensed within that state of operation. They also have to be familiar with the client. So like in Pete's case, I would be familiar with them and their system. The patient would be the bird themselves. I have to be familiar with the birds within their system. And then there has to be a relationship there. In the context of this new rule, there will be times where somebody may not proactively ahead of time work with a veterinarian and encounter sick birds that they need a prescription for. And in that case, the vet will run out, look at birds, and potentially write a treatment for those birds. In my mind, the far better way is to have an ongoing proactive relationship where it doesn't have to be kind of on an emergency basis. Every state defines the duration of that differently. In Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Iowa, at least in the context of hogs, an on-site visit at least once a year is the bare minimum. And that would be an on-site visit once a year with really good communication in the interim and diagnostics and, all the other pieces to fill in the puzzle. And now, depending on the client and the situation, that may have to be adjusted to a shorter duration, depending on the communication in between the on-site farm visits.
Okay, so Pete, I know you work with Jill. So how, as a client, how do you see that relationship of a Vcpr? So she's described what she sees from her perspective, but what do you see from your perspective?
Well, probably the quickest definition is where they rank on your speed dial list. But I guess before working with Jill, we had never worked on-site, hands-on with a vet before. It was a lot of over-the-phone type communication. If you had sick birds, you ran them down. But having now worked with her for a number of years, she knows our system. She knows our people. She knows our barns. A lot of times you can call and explain to her, well, this is going on here again. What do you recommend? And you can try and get ahead of the game before any diagnostic work is done. So just having that relationship where you can call somebody, you're not afraid to call them at any time of day, ask them their opinions and either take it or leave it for what it's worth. So that's, in my definition, that's my definition of.
Thank you. So what kinds of records do you need to keep on the farm on drug usage?
And this is one area that's probably going to need some feeling out, but with
feeling out with whom?
As far as the level of detail FDA is going to expect, because prior to that, with the state having compliance control across our cross-commodity partners, the bare minimum has been an inventory of your on-farm medication, essentially a running inventory of your medication, and then a usage log of where that medication ends up getting used. So on your average turkey operation, I would envision having a common storage site, whether that's a per barn or a centralized location, and inventorying the medication at that central site. And then each barn having its own usage log, so you detail what medications went to what flock. So that's kind of how I see the bare minimum.
So do you see an inventory that is by pack or by box, partial packs? What do you see?
With other systems I've worked with, it would be, you would see something like my inventory of penicillin is 5 cases and 4 packs. It's the key you got to remember is if somebody comes and asks you how much medicine you have and where does it go, you got to be able to explain where it went. And if you go back and you look at your own records and you're like, I don't know what this means, that's not good enough.
So Pete, how do you envision having inventory on or keeping records on usage on your farm?
Again, we're still working on the plan, but our rough draft, I guess, we have a warehouse by our feed mill. We're going to receive product from distributors, and then from there, we'll send it out to our farms, logging out of our warehouse into the farms. Both sides will have a log. Things will have to be checked, make sure that they match up. And then from each farm site, there's going to be a centralized location, and from there, track it then going into the barns and the usage and the date, and that way we can get it back to flock numbers and things like that. So that's the way ours is proposed.
Okay. So is there anything else that has to be done? So you're keeping track of usage or recommending that usage be kept track through inventory. Are there other things that have to be tracked in keeping records on a drug inventory? Jill, do you want to answer that?
And I've kind of put together a preliminary inventory sheet, but you know, in general, all records must contain date, time, initials, product. You know, there's some debate whether you need to record down to the lot, you know, a lot number basis. You know, I would say it kind of depends on the complexity of your system. If you're able to handle tracking down to a lot number, that's great. If that's going to throw a big wrench into things, it kind of seems like one of those optional items. Does that answer the question, Carol?
Yep. And Pete, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really, no.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, not at all. So where should drugs, or where could they be stored in a system? So I'm assuming one place is the farm, but where are other places that they could be stored in systems that you're familiar with, Jill? Do you have?
You know, and I see the kind of folks I work with span the spectrum from the owner-operator who has a single site, or heck, even some of the backyard folks, you know, all the way up to multi-million bird layer complexes. So within that spectrum, it can be very site-specific. It can be anywhere from a very high-tech, you know, legitimate warehouse-type scenario, all the way down to a small segment of shelves in a barn. You know, so far the guidance doesn't say the medication has to be kept under lock and key. I haven't seen that anywhere else except for the big systems, but very site specific.
And Pete, where do you plan to keep drugs?
Generally, we're going to pick one specific spot on each farm. Obviously, the farms are different. Rooms are different. Obviously, for liquid ingredients, they're going to have to be somewhere where it's warm in the wintertime. But the biggest thing for us is to have it simplified farm to farm, because we have people crossing over at times, especially on weekends, holidays, that type of thing. So that this one particular site is not different in their protocol than that site. Just trying to keep it simple. At the same time, hopefully everybody understands it, and making sure that every time something is used or taken, that somebody signs off on it, so we can go back and say, where did this go?
We shall we have them pick them up? You want to pick them up and use them? Okay.
Is this better for folks on the other side? Are they texting Steve?
Yeah, probably. Okay. If wherever you're storing the drugs, what kinds of conditions do you have to meet to have a proper storage facility?
So this is another item that's been kind of debated around, and anywhere from, you know, you must have data logging to make sure you're in compliance with the label storage guidelines. Within the hog industry, when I worked with some very large companies there, you know, generally the regulatory agency would be more fussy with the bigger operation you have. So some of the folks, particularly our distributors, will have higher expectations to meet than the small owner-operator with a single barn or a backyard. I would say the very basic requirement would be don't let product freeze that's not supposed to. So.
Pete?
This is one area where I am not up to date on, so
okay.
I don't have a clue.
I'm sure Jill will be
That's
there to tell you what to do.
That's exactly what we're hoping for.
Good. Okay. So what should you do with drugs that you don't use, whether whole packs or half packs, or what do you do with leftovers? Jill?
And, you know, that's all going to depend on how your inventory system is based. If you're basing out of a central warehouse, you may have to log it back into your central warehouse. If it's logged by barn, you just got to make sure your inventory by barn is up to date and you accurately track your usage, and then comply with any label guidance that's on the package of the product itself as far as opened product.
Okay, Pete?
This is the one area that we don't have 100% planned out in ours. We're talking about what's the best way to do it, whether on each farm site, the central location, if every person goes in there daily and takes what they need for that day, or if the inventory out of there going into a barn, obviously you track the usage in the particular barn. If you can take what you used and what you have left, if that matches what the inventory was in your centralized area, if that's good enough or not. So still work in progress really on that one.
Okay. What should you do with expired product? So you've got expired product in your inventory. So what should you do with that?
And my kind of stock answer on that one is going to be talk to your veterinarian or the manufacturer or your distributor and see what their recommendations are. But use your veterinarian as a resource there and get their input on it.
And that's what we're doing.
So why would you need your veterinarian's input on that?
Because there are some products out there that have a more specific shelf life that really should not be used past their expiration date, and then there's other products where that expiration date is a little more flexible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this winds up our set questions. I want to open the floor to any questions that you might have for these two. Yeah. Hold on, speak into the mic.
As a distributor, are we going to have a script from Jill prior to delivering?
Yes, because for Pete to possess that product, he needs to have a prescription on hand. And now this is kind of where everybody gets all excited, where...
Jill, we didn't hear that question. You'll need to repeat it for us, please.
So the question was, will distributors need a prescription on hand prior to shipping the product to the client? And my answer to that question would be yes, because for the client to legally possess that product, they need to have the prescription in their hand. So how that has been handled within our cross-commodity partners is that veterinarians will issue scripts for commonly used medications with a 6-month duration on them to enable immediate drop shipment or to enable people like Pete to keep that product on hand.
Abby, can you hear me?
Did you hear Steve, Abby?
And that's going to, I'm sorry. So the question was, who is responsible for getting the distributor the prescription, the client, or the veterinarian? And in a way that will depend on the veterinarian who you work with. How I do it and how I've done it in the past when I worked with Christensen's or my current clients is, pretty much we only have a handful of distributors. So I have an Excel spreadsheet that's kind of a master script with our common products we use, and I'm just going to email them to BVS, to PALS, to AHI, and MWI. So all 4 of the main distributors will have those scripts on hand. Some other veterinarians who may not be as used to working in that kind of format may issue you a handwritten script, and then I'm not sure how the distributors will handle that.
Abby, can you hear me? Abby?
Can you hear me, Abby?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, did you hear me, Abby?
Yeah, I did.
All right, great. We've got a microphone that's working then. So, and a reminder, anybody that's observing this online, type in questions in the chat box.
As you're taking your inventory, I can't see you tracking it by box or pail because each distributor is going to have a different amount. So wouldn't it have to be by pack on anything?
So the question was, since many distributors will package their products with different quantities per bulk container, wouldn't it be better to track by the package? And my answer to that would be, if you are getting product in different bulk containers, yes. But there are systems who are like, nope, we always order from the same one. It is always the same. It never changes. That makes it a little easier, you know. So the key is, you know, and really the moral of the story is you need to be able to critically look at your own system and say, I can track product and product use, and it matches up. So if you are getting product that comes in different size bulk containers, yeah, track to the package.
So then, as far as that lot number, we keep track of the lot numbers already. So as distributors, that's not a problem. But for that script, will that have to go on the pail or a package, or how will that be handled by us?
Yeah, and this has been another one that's been kind of a hot topic. So right now, where we're at, FDA has flat out told us that the bulk container is adequate. But now keep in mind, that's federal. States can be more restrictive. So far, we haven't gotten guidance back from the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy on what Minnesota is going to be. So I don't know. It's, you know, it's kind of a tricky one. Right now, I would say put it on the bulk packaging until somebody tells you to do otherwise.
Are there questions from the Melrose group?
Anybody? Anybody?
How long do you have to hold on?
How long do you have to hold on to a prescription?
So in general, my default answer for that is 2 years after the flock has been marketed.
And then Brian Hamar posted in the chat box, will the prescriptions be on a per flock basis, or will it be able to cover multiple flocks on a farm?
That will depend on your relationship with your veterinarian.
So it could be either way.
It could be either way, yep.
Abby, anybody else?
Doesn't look that way. They're all smiling at me nicely.
Okay.
It's better than frowning at you.
Right?
Anybody else have any questions or comments from the room? We have quite a distinguished room full of people here. Questions or comments?
Lynn or Mark or Ben, any comments from your perspective? Or Evan? No.
Okay. Does anybody have any good ideas on inventory tracking systems and stuff? Things like that? No?
You know, on the inventory tracking, I've seen large integrators do everything from coding every package right to a bar-coded herd. This is on a swine operator. You know, but I really think our biggest challenge is just getting folks to write down what they put in the medicator pail every day. And it, you know, if we could get there, that's a huge step in the right direction.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the comment was, as an ABF grower, they've got to do it anyway.
Okay, so I had one question, I guess, one more question for you. So, you know, the best idea is to have a VCPR that's proactive, that you've established, and you're preventing everything that goes, you know, can go wrong. But what do you do when there is something that goes wrong, particularly for like an ABF flock? What do you do then?
Yeah, and you know, I work with many ABF flocks, and certainly, you know, the first reaction is, well, you know, we're always going to try supportive care therapies to hope to get over the hurdle, but sometimes the supportive therapies just aren't enough. And, you know, no matter what the marketing program is, if birds are sick with something that is treatable, they need to be treated. And, you know, getting birds looked at ahead of time is important. And, you know, so with my ABF growers, a lot of times, even if there's a little inkling, it's good to get birds looked at and be like, yep, we can handle this with some supportive care and we'll keep tabs on it. And then if it progresses to something worse, we're certainly ready for it. You know, I think the important take-home message is this new rule shouldn't be a reason why birds don't get treated.
All right. So, I guess nobody has any additional questions, and nobody there, Abby?
Doesn't look that way.
All right, and nobody in the chat?
Nope.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll say thank you to our panel, and we can move on in the program. Thank you.